T-minus 1 minute and counting. Three, two, one.
Good evening. We're just going flying in the Flyer Europa.
Hello and welcome to the Flyer Show. I'm Ed Hicks.
I'm Annabelle Cook.
And I'm Dave Calderwood.
And what a week it is for us, because we've got an amazing guest. It's Bill Perrins, who will be telling us how to fly the remarkable Vulcan bomber. Bill has had an amazing career flying Vulcans operationally for the RAF, as well as later in life, obviously on the display scene. Bill also survived a mid-air collision in a tornado, has flown for a number of airlines, and has displayed a whole array of warbirds. So we're really looking forward to that. Plus, we've got news, and we'll be finding out what delta-winged aircraft the team have in their fantasy hangars. I'm looking forward to going head-to-head with you guys on that. But first, we need to check out our SkyDemon top tip. And we couldn't do what we do without the support of SkyDemon, so thank you, SkyDemon. And this week's top tip is all about airspace above, and it's from Rob.
Hi, I'm Rob from SkyDemon, and here's another top tip.
One of the optional columns that can be enabled in your pilot log from the settings screen is airspace above. You'll see it here in the pilot's log as AA next to the minimum safe altitude column. This column is designed to tell you how much margin you have for climbing on each leg based on the lowest airspace above your planned level. In this simple route, I have all my legs planned at 1700 feet underneath Solent CTA. Here in the virtual radar we see my first leg practically has no ceiling, second and third legs I must stay below 2000 feet, and for the fourth leg I must stay below 3500. We can see these values clearly laid out in the pilot's log here in the airspace above column. If you plan to fly through some airspace, then airspace above will look for the next airspace above, just like it sounds. For example, if I raise the planned level of my fourth leg up to around 4000 feet, we're now climbing up into the Solent CTA, and the new airspace above that is Portsmouth CTA, which starts at flight level 55. Checking the pilot's log again shows the airspace above column has been updated accordingly. If you plan a leg that lies exactly on a vertical airspace boundary, SkyDemon will assume you did not mean to do that, and the column will be highlighted in red as a warning.
For more information, check out our website www.skydemon.aero.
So, airspace above looks like a good way to avoid an infringement.
Especially around Solent airspace.
Yeah, because that is chock-a-block with airspace around there, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and is it me or is Rob's voice getting even deeper?
It is.
It's a good voice, isn't it?
It is.
I think he must be doing a country and western singer impersonation.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Anyway, shall we see what the weather has in store for us this weekend and whether we'll be able to try out this airspace avoidance thing?
I do. Yeah, let's see what Simon has to say.
Evening all, hope you are well this evening. We have not got too bad a weekend ahead of us. Let's take a look. This is the forecast for Friday. You can see here this line of rain. This is the remnants of an old front that's bringing some rain, some cloud across northern England, across parts of central, southern England as we go through the course of Friday morning. Could still be some moderate bursts tied up in that, so do be aware of it. But notice how during the course of the morning and into the afternoon it slips eastwards, eventually getting into East Anglia and the southeast during the afternoon. So quite a murky end to the day there. Some showers getting into the far west of Scotland. One or two of these are probably going to be turning out to be fairly heavy, but other areas actually not faring too bad. So sort of southern Scotland, northwest England, Ireland, northern and western parts of Wales. Probably the afternoon, yes, it's a little bit murky through parts of northern England, the Midlands and southern England, but it does become more flyable. Base is 2,000 to 4,000 feet tops at about 10,000 feet, but certainly misty, murky and damp across East Anglia and the southeast. Saturday morning starts okay across many central and southern areas, perhaps some morning mist patches. They will clear away and then it's a fine start to the day. Rain though getting into western Scotland, much of Ireland by the time we're getting towards midday. The winds increasing as well. Some outbreaks of rain by then into northwest England, and then through the afternoon that rain wanting to spill eastwards, becoming quite heavy, as you can see there, across much of Scotland, apart from the far northeast, much of northwestern England, northern and western parts of Wales and Ireland. The base is less than 1,000 feet, tops 15,000 feet. Very windy as well, southwesterly gales, gusts of 50 knots quite easily. Gusting up to 40 or 50 knots across northeast England too, so non-VFRable there, despite there not being the rain, and probably breezer in the Midlands and southern England, but I think certainly these areas are going to be faring better, generally VFRable, bases around 3,000 to 4,000 feet. The rain then goes eastwards overnight into Sunday, and for Sunday itself we get more rain getting into Scotland, into northwest England, into Wales and into southwest England as the morning turns into the afternoon. It then slows down, affecting much of northern England, Wales, the Midlands, southwest England for the afternoon, although notice the far southeast probably is faring better, and it becomes brighter in Scotland and Ireland with the winds decreasing, and in fact the winds decrease everywhere as we get through the afternoon. So you've got to select your time of flying very carefully into this weekend. And as you're getting ready for Christmas, it's not that far away, is it? I've announced my next Aviation Weather School online, my Part 1 course. Finished the last one of 2025 this week, and I think many of you went away having enjoyed that course. Certainly the feedback has been excellent, so thank you for that. But if you haven't been to weather school yet, this is your chance. On the consecutive Tuesday evenings of the 27th of January and the 3rd of February, between 6:30 p.m. and 9 p.m, I will take you through the wondrous and mysterious world of weather. I'll show you how you can predict weather windows 5 days in advance. I'll show you how you can more safely and more often and build your confidence in finally understanding weather. It doesn't matter whatever your experience of flying is, from pre-PPL right the way through to commercial. I guarantee you will learn a heck of a lot on this course. It's well worth the money. You can book your place now by using the QR code there, or going to weatherschool.co.uk. And of course my weather books are available at weatherschool.co.uk as well. Again, perfect gifts. Okay, I'll leave you with that for now. Whatever you're doing, thanks again for watching. Have a safe weekend. I'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Well, just a reminder that Simon has all sorts of Christmas gifts available from Weather School. So you go to his website. There's a link on the Flyer website. Go to Weather School and you can buy someone a Christmas present to do with weather.
Can you give the gift of the weather wizard?
Could I have a Simon for Christmas?
That would be amazing.
Oh, I'd love
do you get to dress him up in what shirt you want?
It's just gone pear-shaped straight away. Let's move on.
Let's get on with the news. Who's
All
first?
I want for Christmas is Simon.
You are it.
Yeah.
I'm first. Okay, and this is the news. So it was the news that a 3D printed part in a British home built caused an accident at Gloucester Airport earlier this year. Quite interestingly, this accident, it wasn't a fatality, and the aircraft ended up resting in the instrument landing system at Gloucester, so on the airfield. But there's been quite a lot of interest around the world on this, because a lot of people are amazed that somehow a 3D printed part, which was made from low temperature melty plastic, ended up in an engine bay. The aircraft was a Cozy Mark IV and had been modified, and that modification process had been documented by the LAA and approved. However, one part on the intake wasn't disclosed, and that was this part that was claimed to be purchased from an air show overseas. Ended up in the aeroplane, and the owner pilot was making an approach to Gloucester. put the power on and no throttle response, and the actual intake had collapsed. There's a photo in the AIB report that's quite surprising.
Yeah.
Quite a surprise, that one.
Quite a surprise. We should say this was in an AIOB report which came out last week.
Yes, yeah. So definitely worth reading. But yeah, very surprising how that's. I've seen that in a number of overseas news stories. So it's.
Well, I guess 3D printing is it's kind of like the future in many respects.
Yeah.
But clearly, the
material choice is important. There's lots of people. There's lots of big manufacturers using 3D printing in jet engines, but that's like sintered metals and things like that.
I guess with an awkward to manufacture part, like an airbox, for instance, then 3D printing is the obvious choice.
It's a great choice, but you do need the right materials, or you 3D print and use that to make the mold that you use other materials to fashion something.
So it's the LAA having a bit of soul search over this.
Well, no, because essentially the LAA is they from reading the report, they acted in good faith. They approved everything that was presented to themselves to them in the mod application. Yeah. So it's so you have to wonder how this part ended up.
Yeah.
But I heard that the LAA inspectors have been asked to check aircraft under their care.
Yes,
just to double check.
I think it does raise an increasing awareness of 3D printed parts in airplanes, because it's with the advent of 3D printers for anyone's workshop now. The making complex shapes is within our grasp, but you just need to be careful about what materials.
Yes.
So there's a real interesting report. It's there's a story on our website if you want to follow that up.
That's right. So I've got the next story, and it's quite a in-depth story. So I may have to look at my notes every now and again.
Hold on to your hats.
Scottish Aero Club has compiled a briefing paper for the club members to help them understand what's happening with the airspace modernisation around Edinburgh Airport. Edinburgh Airport was proposing to transition to what's called performance-based navigation. I'll come back and explain it in a second. But the club believes that this will create pipelining of airline traffic flows, which will create a significant safety and operational hazard for general aviation aircraft. It's important to say the club does recognise the benefits of performance-based navigation, known as PBN, because it uses satellite and other technologies to define flight paths based on accuracy, integrity, and performance requirements. So it involves less ATC, but it's a more efficient system. So there's all sorts of benefits: flight times, lower fuel consumption, lower emissions, less noise pollution. And so apparently the most important thing for these guys, increased airspace capacity. All worthwhile things. But the club says the current circular controlled zone, the CTR, will change to a rectangular one, and it would extend controlled airspace over well-used routes used by GA aircraft. There's one in particular. The Scottish Aero Club is based in Perth, which is north of Edinburgh. When they want to go south, they have to go somehow get through this chunk of airspace. Yeah. Up till now, they've been going over the Firth of Forth from a place called Earls Ferry to North Berwick. That's an established GA route. Yeah. And they fly across at about 5,000 feet, which gives them plenty of. Should they have engine failure over water, they can glide clear. They can glide to land. But this new plan would restrict them to a lower height, 3,500, which they feel is not really enough. And also it would curtail their, what you might call, emergency escape routes should the weather suddenly come in. Yeah. And we're talking northeast of Scotland here. Yeah. So
the chances of bad weather is highly likely.
Yep. So the club has, in fact, they've come up with this, we'll show it on the screen about now, they've come up with this heat map, which is based on one member, his flying. And you can see how he starts off and returns to Perth, comes down the east side of Edinburgh over this ferry route, this from Earls Ferry to North Berwick, and it's really used a lot. It's just one guy, and so the club is asking its members to respond to the consultation, which ends on the 26th of January, and they produce their heat maps from SkyDemon. Yeah. They produce a heat map showing their routes to prove that this route is important to them.
Perhaps SkyDemon could help here by giving a consolidated heat map.
They probably
the
could.
whole area
I,
as
and
well.
it seems that Scottish Aero Club are pretty clued up about this, so perhaps they've made that approach already.
Is there anything that we can do to support their
Or fly backwards and forwards along that route multiple times.
Well, I think it's not just Scottish Aero Club who can respond to the consultation. I mean, if you regularly fly up to Scotland, particularly using that east coast route, then your heat maps may well show that.
Yeah.
And it may well be a route that you prefer to use.
And fundamentally, evidence is always you can come up with an emotional response, but actually,
Yeah.
fundamentally, evidence every time.
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
And of course, this what's known as the airspace modernisation process.
Yeah.
They're starting in Scotland, but it's going to affect lots of other places. And I should imagine performance-based navigation is going to be used elsewhere as well. I mean, it makes sense. Yeah. Less fuel burn.
Yeah.
Less emissions.
Yeah.
And
But
so on.
that should go on and should address all the needs of all the airspace users universally.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So there's some news in the world of British Women Pilots Association. Apparently, they've got a new chair. Annabelle,
I heard that.
Do you know anything about that?
I might know a little bit, yes.
Fill us in, because congratulations, you are the new chair of BWPA.
I am, yes.
You must be going. My agenda is this.
Yes. So obviously it's very early days. This happened on Sunday, so not even a week into the role. But yeah, I have a few things that I'd like to focus on in the coming year. So one of them is the members, because of course it's a member-based organisation. We've got 500 members of the BWPA, not just in the UK. And we've got some around Europe, and I think we have one in Australia as well.
Okay.
So I want to make sure that they feel welcomed and it's inclusive and they get value for money out of their membership fee. I'm also looking at what we do for our volunteers. We're entirely volunteer-led and run. So all of the hours of work that we put in, we just do because we think that the association is really important.
And
but
you've just had a big year of celebrating your 70th birthday as well. Haven't you?
We have, yes, which has been fantastic. Yeah, we have a lot of regional groups, and they've been putting on events around the country with sort of picnics and parties and lunches. There's been a lot of cake consumed, which
Cake
is
and
always
flying, what a great
always
combination.
important. And then the third thing that I want to focus on over the next sort of year or so is partnerships. So I've already spoken to Simon at the LAA and I've had a chat with Air Ability, but I think there's a limited number of pilots, obviously. We're all pulling from the same pool. We're all trying to do similar things. So I'm really keen to try to tie the BWPA into other associations. So yeah, I'd be really glad to hear from anybody that's interested in working together.
You heard it here. And I guess people can get hold of you wearing your BWPA hat via the BWPA website?
Yes, they can, or they can email me, chairwoman@bwpa.co.uk.
Wow, that's just perfect.
I've got a couple of questions,
Oh, no.
Annabelle.
Oh, no.
Yes, Dave.
Why should anybody join the BWPA? I mean, if just a pilot, why do you have to join? Why does a woman pilot have to join the BWPA?
Well, they don't have to, obviously, but a lot of women in aviation still do face a lot of challenges and discrimination. I've experienced myself 3 incidents just in the last year. And what the BWPA provides is a safe space where there's other women who have experienced similar things. So it's a really nice way just to share those experiences and also to get some support for. One of the things that we find is that our members really enjoy is we have regional WhatsApp groups, which of course we can have very open discussions there about what we've experienced and give each other support in that way. There's also other benefits, of course, so our annual scholarship scheme, which, yes, we'll be announcing our winners before Christmas from this year's scholarships.
And you have a lot of scholarships.
This year, I think we had around 37.
That's amazing.
Ish,
Yeah.
yeah, give or take.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Very good.
And I understand you don't have to be a woman to join the BWPA. You're accepting male members.
yes, it's my favourite phrase. That we have a lot of male members. Yeah, thanks, DC.
Dave.
Yes.
Just for that, you can have the next news story.
I have got.
Yes.
Sorry.
Anybody that supports women in aviation can join the BWPA.
Okay. So Gloucester Airport. There are, we all know that the Gloucester Airport saga has been going on for a while. The sale to an outside group known as Horizon Aero Group, Aviation Group, has been going on. There's been due diligence for their potential purchase of the airport. That was supposed to end on the 28th of November,
Right.
but it hasn't. It's still going on, apparently. And last week, a local business website called Punchline published an article saying the investor behind the purchaser, the potential purchaser,
Yeah.
has backed out.
Oh.
And or is in doubt anyway.
Yes.
Everyone's gone stum at the moment.
That's not a surprise.
No,
really.
because I've been in touch with been in touch with both the sellers,
Yes.
Gloucestershire City Council and Cheltenham Borough Council. They're both saying the due diligence process is still undergoing whatever.
Due diligence.
I also sent an email off to Horizon.
Yeah.
Nothing. They in Horizon's defence, they've always said they're not going to be interviewed until they've actually completed the purchase. But no, so £30 million is what is at stake, which is particularly important to Gloucester City Council because they've just asked the government for a bailout of about £12.5 million to avoid bankruptcy.
Okay.
So there's a lot of pressure on the people involved.
And some big numbers in play.
Yeah.
Okay. And you've got the next news story too.
I'll get them punished for this, aren't I? Yes.
Yeah.
So, what makes a great flying club? Whatever it is, Limerick Flying Club in Ireland has it in spades, and last week they won a top award as Aviation Company of the Year in Ireland's annual Aviation Industry Awards.
Oh, well done then.
Yeah, the club's based at Cunard Aerodrome, I think that's how you say it, 2 miles west of the city. They also won the General and Sport Aviation Award. You might think a club in the west coast of Ireland would be a bit of a hillbilly operation.
A bit
You know,
like like
Dave!
some kind of Father Ted.
Oh, yeah. Something nice and generally easy go. But no,
Apologies, viewers.
the judges noted the club's data-driven performance monitoring. Wow.
Wow.
Commitment to innovation and strong governance. They've got 3 new Tecnam aircraft they're training on. Judges highlighted how its sustained investment in skills, community partnerships and the promotion of best practice has reinforced its influence within Ireland's aviation ecosystem. I mean, this is a club that's doing everything right. Incredible.
It's really good to hear
Yeah.
because people often have a bit of a down. It's like flying clubs
Yeah.
not making enough effort.
Yeah.
So.
But we can't talk about Limerick Flying Club without having...
Well, we can, but I fear that you've written some kind of limerick.
And I'm a bit worried about what might rhyme with Limerick.
There was a young pilot called Dick who learned how to fly at Limerick. He was airborne one day, early in May, when he spun, felt sick and landed very quick.
That didn't go where I thought it might.
No,
Thank goodness.
It was still awful. But
It
not-
was really bad.
But no, yes. Annabelle, fix
Yes.
us with good news.
Yes. The Edinburgh 2026 calendar has arrived. So you can get one of these from the Goodwood Aerodrome front desk for the bargain price of £12.50. All proceeds from the calendar, as usual, go towards directly supporting the Rob Wildeboer Scholarship. As always, though, stock is limited. So, of course, if you want to grab some for Christmas presents, get yourself down to Goodwood quick or fast.
Can you get them online as well, or is it a turn up at
Ooh.
Goodwood only job?
I believe it is a turn up at Goodwood only.
But that's good because it's fun to go to Goodwood and
It
there's
is.
a lovely team there.
And there's really good food, if you can afford it.
There we go, £12.50, right? And
Yes,
that's it's money. That's
a fantastic
yeah,
scholarship.
It's a good
that-
fundraiser.
yeah.
Great cause. So yeah, buy a Goodwood calendar
Or 2.
or 2 or 3. We should get
Yeah.
one for the wall here.
Get one for me. I'd like one.
Okay. Okay, so joining us this week is our fabulous guest, Bill Perrins. Bill, thanks for coming along to the Flyer Studio. What do you think?
I think it's pretty good, pretty rustic. It's very
Rustic.
professional, and I'm glad to be here.
Well, brilliant. Thanks for coming along. Bill has got a book coming out in spring. It's called From Vulcan to Spitfire and Back, because Bill is one of a small group of people who has flown the Avro Vulcan, and we're going to get into a lot of that a little bit later. But Bill, how did it all get started for you?
Well, I was a little boy and I liked airplanes. Where I was born in Belfast, the place was buzzing with naval airplanes from the local naval air yard at Sydenham. So my father flew air cadets with the Air Experience flight at RAF Vulcan, which is now Belfast main airport. And so I was kind of going to go that way. And at the time, Belfast was a bit of a dodgy place. So I thought, well, I'll get away from that and I'll aim at aviation. I put all of my effort into becoming a pilot. I was very fortunate. I was granted an air cadet flying scholarship, did the bulk of a PPL on that, finished my PPL privately by paying my own way, working in a bakery, getting covered in flour and the like. And then I finished that, applied to join the Air Force, was very lucky, was accepted, went into the Air Force, learnt to fly courtesy of Her Majesty the Queen, and that's how I got going.
Okay. And so you get into the Air Force, and what did you get your hands on?
Various airplanes. Started unofficially on the Bulldog. The Navy decided to pre-teach us on the Bulldog.
Oh.
Did that for a few hours, and then onto the Jet Provost Mark III, a military jet, fantastic.
Yeah.
And then finished the wings course on that. Was very privileged and got my wings awarded by Sir Douglas Bader. I could go into
right.
that
That's
at yeah, we were told we could invite a VIP.
Right.
So
Aim high.
Yeah.
we did. And I wanted to get Agnetha Falskog, the blonde lady from ABBA, but that was vetoed. And then somebody suggested Sir Douglas Bader. So we wrote to him at Shell and said, please come and give us our wings. And I penned a little note at the end of it and said, if you can't make it, we'll ask Kenneth Moore instead, who portrayed him in the famous black and white film Reach for the Sky. Anyway, Sir Douglas came, presented the wings. We all puffed our chests out. That made us all feel really good about aviation and about the RAF. So we progressed onto the Jet Provost Mark V, which was a more powerful version, and then hop across to Northwest Wales to fly the Hawk, and we were on the first proper Hawk course.
Okay.
Tearing around at low level in that was fantastic. It went a lot quicker, therefore it was a lot easier to get lost a lot further away and a lot quicker. Finished that course down to RAF Brodie in Southwest Wales, where we learned how to sort of master weaponry, dropping bombs, shooting rockets, firing guns, air-to-air combat, which was the best bit for me. I loved it. And then I got posted onto the F4 Phantom. I fell off that course because I didn't make the grade on that. I was the first person to come through training on a non-swept wing airplane prior to the Phantom. That's an excuse, but I probably wouldn't have hacked it anyway. So I went off to fly the Vulcan for a few years, which was very, very interesting. And then I went off to become an instructor on jet provosts at Linton-on-Ouse in Yorkshire.
Okay.
Ultimately, I wanted to have another crack at the fast jet system. I was lucky enough to get to fly the Tornado F3 for a number of years, based at RAF Leeming, still in North Yorkshire.
And I think, having read the book, you actually survived a mid-air collision, didn't you, in a tornado?
I did. It was a little bit scary, but
A bit.
all of those involved, we got all professional at the last second and managed to save the day without jumping out of the airplane. And the airplane I was flying, we were lucky we managed to get into Newcastle Airport.
Yeah.
And after thinking, oh my goodness, if we wiped 2 other people out with a collision,
Yeah.
suddenly the other airplane turned up. So we all survived the day.
And you you turned up at Newcastle and got told off for parking your jet in the wrong spot, didn't you?
Yes. Apparently we should have known that a particularly very important British Airways flight was going to park where I had decided to park. So I got a bit of a wigging from air traffic and sent off to the naughty step to shut down the airplane and then breathe a sigh of relief. Went back to base, had a few beers.
Yeah.
There was a board of inquiry. I'm happy to take most of the rap for that accident. It shouldn't have happened. I learned a lot, and I think about that every day because every day is a bonus after you've had a big incident like that.
Yeah, because that's, for a lot of people, mid-air collision is a one-time only deal, isn't it?
Yep. There was no Hollywood music in the background, but it just happened. And it happened in an instant. I didn't see the other airplane. We were flying head-to-head, beak-to-beak, at a closing speed of about 900 knots.
Okay.
There was a big bang. The bloke in the back of my airplane said, "What was that?" I told him the truth. And we just got on with the job of ensuring could the airplane fly. Miraculously, it did. We took it down.
I've seen the photos that say that the belly of your airplane kind of got ripped open, didn't it?
It did. The fin of the other airplane went under my bottom effectively, and had it gone a little bit, an inch or so further into the body of the airframe, would have hit the liquid oxygen pot and everything would have gone bang. So somebody was looking after me, and I'm very happy they were.
And what's not in the book actually is what happened to the people involved. Did everyone continue to fly, or did which is really good, because I think if I'd been through something like that, I might have questioned my choices.
Well,
although
I think
you survived. So.
Yeah, I think everybody goes off to a quiet corner and reflects on these things. I know I did and still do, and I'm very happy that the way things turned out. Yeah, but I have a huge degree of sympathy for people who have an incident in the air and kind of get put off flying a little bit.
Yeah,
I was lucky. I still like flying.
Yeah. So after RAF.
Yep, I was unemployed for a short while, which I really enjoyed. I was able to go to the unemployment office and ask for the money, and they said, you can't have that until you fill the form in with 3 career choices. So I put television game show host, newsreader, airline pilot, and they went, well, we haven't got any of those. I said, I told you that. So they gave me the money. So after 3 or 4 months, was lucky. Got a job with Monarch Airlines, which was a super outfit to work for.
Yeah.
Flew the 757 for a while, and then a bunch of us got made redundant because there was a slight downturn. Luckily, we were all placed into air tours, flying in 757 and 767. And then after a while, I realized I liked long haul more than short haul, because we did a bit of each in air tours. I applied to and was lucky enough to get a job with Virgin Atlantic Airways, flying the Jumbo Classic, the Jumbo 200, and I loved that. The company was great, the people were great, the airplanes were great, and it was a very relaxed but professional outfit.
I know in the book you talked about the fact that you found the Jumbo Classic cockpit a bit more analog. You seem to like that?
Yeah, I like clockwork gauges. I don't like to be faced with an enormous, great big Star Wars tube with information all over it. Gives you information overload. Personally, I like old-fashioned instruments that do what they say on the front.
Yeah. And I'm guessing, so at Virgin, flying the jumbo jet, on your resume, you've got Vulcan. That sets you up for a great phone call, doesn't it?
I guess it does. In the background for a number of years, the Vulcan to the Sky organization had been busy getting the Vulcan XH558 ready for flight. They flew it. After a couple of seasons, they decided they needed another pilot. I got a phone call, and they said, well, we kind of need another display pilot, and the criteria are it has to be somebody with Vulcan experience, somebody who's current flying 4 jet aircraft. It's me again. Somebody who's current at display flying. Yeah. I was lucky enough to be flying Spitfires and the like around, so it I was one of one maybe. Yeah. And they said, would you come up to Bruntingthorpe in Leicestershire for a quick chat? So I flew up there in a Chipmunk, met the team, and at the end of the day, the boss man said to me, he took me into his little office and said, would you be interested in coming on board? And I said, I'll think about it, thank you very much. And I went away and I thought about it for a few days, and I was torn, because I was having the time of my life flying big piston aircraft, which is just a privilege and lovely. But then again, it was a privilege to be asked to display the Vulcan. So I weighed it all up and I said, yep, I'm going to do that, because I can't do everything. No. Can't fly Spitfires, the Vulcan, and maintain a full-time roster flying Jumbo 400s.
So unfair when you can't do all of those.
I know, but it was it was tricky as a balance to get everything sorted out. But Virgin Atlantic were tremendous, as Donald Trump would say, in giving me as much time off and the right time off to fly various airplanes. I was lucky.
So you get back in the Vulcan. What's that like? Is it like...
Do you remember everything?
No, people often say to me, does it come flooding back? No, it didn't even come ebbing back. The only bit I recognised was the control column, because I'd seen one several years before at a party. Somebody had stolen one and it was on their mantelpiece. It's the only bit I remember. But we went through quite a lot of training on all the technical systems, had a go at the Vulcan up at Wellesbourne Mountford. The team there very kindly let us use their Vulcan to practice the checks and start it up and taxi around the airfield. So we did that. And then I was ready for my first flight in the spring. So I was sitting in the Vulcan, right-hand seat, waiting to go. But we didn't have the right paperwork because the authorities hadn't progressed the permit to fly completely, and we had to fly with a permit to fly. And the CAA correctly mandated that we were not allowed to fly with any unserviceability. So we waited, and we had a cut-off time at 5 o'clock to get airborne in the Vulcan from Waddington and take it down to Yeovilton for their air day the following day. At 5 to 5, somebody came scurrying across the pan toward the airplane and shoved a bit of paper into the cockpit. We were allowed to fly. So off we went. And that was strange. I had always been flying with a lightweight headset in big airplanes or a helmet in fighter type aircraft such as the Spitfire. So to fly with a helmet and an oxygen mask in this reasonably big airplane was quite a change and quite a drift back down memory lane.
And the Vulcan cockpit, because it's a big aeroplane, but it looks like the Vulcan. It's like the reverse TARDIS.
It's tiny, isn't it?
It looks like a black hole, to be honest.
It is. It's you climb into this thing up a little skimpy ladder that's bolted onto the escape slide into what I would call a coal hole downstairs for 3. In the military days, you'd 2 navigators and an air electronics operator sat pointing rearwards on this set of little chairs, staring at all manner of instruments. And then there'd be another step up for the 2 pilots to squeeze through a narrow gap. It was a bit tricky way back, but even more tricky for me these days because I've expanded slightly, or have the seats got closer together. And we got into the airplane, sat down, strapped in, and got it going, which all seemed to work. The airplane, as ever, was presented to us by the engineering team as a perfect machine. So we got the thing going, taxied out onto the runway. This is going to happen for real. Yeah. So onto the runway, grab the throttles, and we stand them up to 80%, which is approximately throttles vertical. That just ensures the engines are spooling up at a correct rate and that the brakes are holding, because there's a lot of power there ready to jump the brakes.
And during the process of getting the aeroplane ready for display, they took a lot of weight out of it too, didn't they? So
they did. They removed a lot of the military equipment, and that was between 4 and 5 tons weight.
Wow.
Radar, bombing equipment, and 2 navigators. They were replaced by a little tiny GPS.
I heard navigators are really heavy.
Well, some of these, we had an aircrew feeder we'd chomp our way through before going flying. And so there was a lot lighter, and we flew generally with very light fuel loads. So generally, it was a much lighter, much more sprightly airplane than I had encountered in military service. So onto the runway. I'll just talk you through the takeoff. So we stand the throttles up to 80% on the brakes. Pause, whoosh, full power, and you can feel the airplane nod as off it goes. And I remember thinking, my goodness, I don't remember it being quite as slippery as this. Anyway, off it goes down the runway. Luckily, there was no major crosswind. So initially, one keeps straight using the wheel brakes, which are controlled by, you have to put your thumb on a very fiddly little button at the base of the control column. Note, it's a control column, not a steering wheel thing. The rudder came alive very quickly at about 60 knots. And then we keep straight, pointing down the runway, holding the control column forward to glue the airplane to the ground. And then at a nominal rotate speed of about 135 knots. Sometimes in displays, we'd hold it on the ground a little bit more, so the thing would spring into the air very rapidly. Anyway, my first flight, I squeezed back at about 135 knots, and the airplane did leap into the sky, surprisingly sprightly for a big airplane. Handles more like a small airplane.
Really?
Yep. It's, people say fighter-like performance. I'm never really sure what that means.
It's what, 100-foot span?
Yeah, just over 100 feet. 100 feet in all directions. 100 feet fore and aft. 100 feet across. It's a big tin triangle. So once in the air, to throttle back so we didn't exceed the undercarriage limiting speed, and then point down to RAF Lyneham in Wiltshire to practice a couple of circuits there. So we stayed below the cloud, which was probably legal, and we got down to to Lynham where we did a couple of circuits just to get the hang of it, not actually touching down because it's not the longest runway in the world there. And then we set off down toward Yeovilton in Somerset to pre-position for their air day the following day.
Okay.
Right, this was to be my first landing.
No stress.
No stress at all.
No one's looking.
No one's looking, but lots of people on the ground with cameras. I hadn't landed this airplane for 27 years.
Okay.
So the pressure was on. Chap next to me gave me control halfway around the final turn. We didn't have an awful lot of fuel because we flew with light fuel loads, so that we were light for displays. Also, it cost money to cart a load of fuel around the place.
Yeah.
And there were several Hawker Hunters in the circuit as well to position for the display. They were trying to get in. They were a bit short of fuel. So we all had to kind of agree amongst ourselves who was going to go in first. Anyway, the chap I was with gave me control halfway around the final turn. And I was cognizant that old-fashioned jet engines take a long time to spool up.
Yeah.
So we set high drag air brake, which means you have to fly with a higher power setting to get a more instant response. I lined up on final approach, and I just thought at 200 or 300 feet, this ain't quite good enough. We may not be able to neatly arrive at the threshold of the runway. So I elected to go around full power. It was a good idea. It makes a heck of a noise. And if you look at YouTube, put in Yeovilton Vulcan display, go around, you will see us. There's a flock of sheep directly underneath us, some of them running away to the right, some of them running away to the left. Off we went, flew around the circuit, and then did a better approach to land.
I wish I'd been one of those sheep.
Well, one of those sheep wasn't too happy because
Yeah, not that sheep.
the story is one of those sheep had a slight heart attack or whatever sheep have.
You're the only person to cause the death of a sheep with a Vulcan.
Yep.
and they threatened to paint a sheep on the sides of the fuselage.
They were going to stencil a sheep on the side. That will be a good epitaph. So we had a nice time flying the airplane that weekend. I don't think I did the display because we basically worked each other up to display standard. I was more of a servant in the first couple of flights,
Right.
operating various things like the undercarriage up and down and making sure that everything was tickety-boo.
And which other guys were you flying with?
We would fly with another pilot.
Yeah.
On that occasion, it was with Martin Withers, the chief pilot.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. They're all nice people who like flying,
Yeah.
and they're all aware that they're there to show the airplane off, not themselves.
Yeah.
Down the back of the airplane, we would generally have one air electronics operator, fancy name for a very technical engineer. Occasionally, we would fly with a navigator down the back who would help during the weekend doing commentary and the like.
Yeah.
But it was a very nice professional bunch of people.
Okay. So in terms of flying the Vulcan, obviously, you once you've got settled into it, was it clearly something you really enjoyed?
Yeah, it was enjoyable. You had to keep your wits about you because the thing had a lot of momentum. And in terms of manoeuvring around an air display, we had a lot of limits, which we could quite easily bust in terms of engine fatigue,
Yeah.
airframe fatigue. We were limited to 1.8 G. So to keep the airplane within a close proximity to the airfield, we had to keep the speed down, which meant flying at generally quite low powers.
Right.
Quite often we would have to sneak the power up a little bit, but put the air brake out so that we maintained pretty instant throttle response. So it was a delicate balancing act between speed, noise, because the public like the noise, who doesn't, and airframe and engine fatigue.
I think people would be surprised at that because you always watch it. I've watched a few Vulcan displays, and it just seems like a frenzy. But to hear you describe it as like it's like a real gentle balancing act is quite a surprise.
Yeah, it was quite rattly inside the airplane because we would do basically quite a lot of wingovers linked by a few straight and level fly paths and reasonably tight turns.
Yeah.
We would have to try to keep the speed low during the wingovers, which would, I'm going to use my little model here,
Okay.
would commence with trying to keep the speed back to about 160 knots, hopefully a little bit less than that. We would pitch up and then spiral round
Yeah.
on the way up, keeping the speed at 160 knots or less, and then topping out at about 140 knots or less, and then and that was quite dramatically, sometimes get up to about 135 degrees of bank. The airplane would have quite happily rolled, but no, we would commit to a nose down, and then as the nose comes through the horizon, put on a lot of power so that we had enough power to bottom out. So the airplane was flying quite slowly and turning tight at 160 knots or less. The whole thing would be rattling and banging, and you think, my goodness, this is, it's like being probably in the back of a recently filled bin lorry. And you can't see much out the front.
Sounds terribly romantic.
The airplane was designed for 2 pilots, and then late on in the development, they said, sorry, it was designed for 1 pilot.
Right.
And then they said, let's pump it up to 2. So it was quite a tight fit, tiny little windows. So while one pilot is flying, the other one's looking out the window to make sure we're going the right way and we're not going to bust any crowd lines and the like. Yeah.
So in terms of flying the Vulcan, how does it compare to other aeroplanes you've flown?
It's different.
Yeah.
One has to use the rudder quite a lot. It's very, very powerful. It's very easy to overstress in terms of G. You just have to be quite careful at low level that you're not going to bust any limits. In the air show arena, it's interesting because flying a Spitfire or something, you know what you're going to do next, and you just get on with it and make sure you're not going to bust any limits. But with a big airplane with 3 or 4 people on board, you have to keep them briefed all the time what's coming up next, because they don't like sitting down the back of a big buffeting airplane, not entirely knowing what's going on in case something should go wrong and you have to abandon the airplane. So there's quite a bit of forethought in terms of positioning, making sure you're not too far away from the crowd, making sure you're using the power correctly. It's very expensive every time we applied full power. We would cost out each air show in terms of the number of full power applications we had per display. We knew the crowd liked to hear the airplane at full power, especially that Vulcan Howl. We worked out that the best howl was to start the power coming up when we were 90 degrees off the crowd. So if the camera is the crowd, at about this point, I'm going to put the bank on, open up to full power, and then in a gentle descent, ideally, as the power bit, we'd produce a howl whilst pointing at the crowd.
I love that you scientifically set out to find the best howl.
Yeah, well, that's what the airplane was known for largely, was the noise and the vibration on the ground. I'm very aware that at a lot of air shows we set car alarms off going, and poor dogs in cars would start doing wolf type noises. And the only time I've ever experienced that sort of noise and vibration was when I was fortunate enough to see a space shuttle launch once. Similar, the ground vibrates.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So in terms of your time on the aeroplane, obviously it is an older piece of kit. Did you ever have any problems?
Yeah, I did. The engineering crew always presented us with a perfectly serviceable airplane, as I said. I could think of a couple of occasions, one en route to an air show on the south coast somewhere from Doncaster, Finningley, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves Airport. We were doing a practice over the recently disused RAF Cottesmore, and we had a hydraulic problem, which meant we needed to get the airplane on the ground, ideally landing into wind.
Right.
It was a very, very windy day, so we elected to land at Coningsby, which had an into-wind runway. It was a weekend. Coningsby were quite surprised when we chirped up and said, hi, we'd like to come and land there, please, in our Vulcan. Anyway, we arrived there, landed into wind, luckily came to halt on the runway. The hydraulics allowed us to bring the airplane gently to a halt using wheel brakes and aerodynamic braking, where we present a huge plan form to the wind to slow up and then lower the nose at 80 knots.
Yeah.
And you got told off again?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, getting quite used to being told off.
So you can't park there.
Yeah.
Can't park there, can't park on my runway. A chap came out and said, you're on my runway. Okay.
So I am.
You went,
Yep.
I think it's the Queen's runway, to be
I
fair.
think we both own this runway. And he said, right, we're going to drag this airplane off the runway using chains, because with this airfield's holding quick reaction alert, and we need the runway to launch the Typhoons, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
And we had a chat, and I suggested that, can you maybe start the takeoff run on the Typhoons, should you need to launch them, a little bit down the runway. And they sort of agreed, yeah, we could use the taxiway for that. But once they're airborne, we're going to drag your airplane off the runway using chains and tugs. And I said, well, and it was going to be the end of that airframe. It would never be serviceable
did
again.
that, yeah.
So we rang our engineers at Doncaster, and they rushed down with the towing arm, towed us off the runway. The airplane was clear of the runway, so we no longer had that as a threat to our airplane's future.
And I'm guessing a tow bar for a Vulcan is not just chuck it in the car.
No.
And
It looks like a huge big missile without a thing in the front that goes bang. It's a big, long, enormous green pole that looks like a jousting pole.
Yeah.
And they attach it to the nose wheel and tug us around the airfield. So the airplane was broken for a couple of weeks. And then as they always did, the engineers managed to fix it, and we were ready to rock again.
Yeah. But you had, reading the book, and I'm not sure I grasped just how serious this was, but you had quite a serious problem.
Yep. You're talking about the Scottish incident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where we were up in Ayr for the air show. We'd just done a display at Portrush, Northern Ireland, hopped across the Irish Sea, and then the chap in the other seat did a super display at Ayr near the golf course over the sea. And we then turned just to the north to land at Prestwick Airport. Everything was going hunky-dory. As I selected the undercarriage down, I heard the normal noises and flickering of lights. And then I noticed that the little red light that should have been green by this stage was staring at me from the undercarriage indicator, which meant that the two main wheels were down, but the undercarriage nose wheel leg was not locked down. It meant that it was either up, partly up, but it was definitely not locked down.
Right.
Now, we didn't have a huge amount of fuel because we like to fly at light weights, and we had to make a decision. Now, if we have to abandon the airplane, well, the two pilots, we're quite lucky because we've got ejection seats and we can pop out the top and float merrily down to Earth. But on this particular flight, we had two air electronics operators in the back, one performing a check ride on the other. What a check ride this was to be. So we thought, well, if we can't get this undercarriage leg completely down, we may have to abandon the aircraft because it's not good to land with the nose wheel fully retracted or semi-retracted because the airplane could fold up over itself on landing. So we tried everything we could to get the nose leg down by wiggling the airplane aggressively from side to side, applying a little bit of G, and we did a fly through the airfield for air traffic to have a look, and they said, well, we're not really sure. Luckily on board we have a periscope, so the air electronics operator can use his submarine-style periscope, swiveling his hat round, having a look.
Is that down periscope?
Down periscope. And I should christen it the Perrins scope. Anyway, he looked out, and the undercarriage looked to be down to him because the periscope was in line fore and aft with the nose wheel leg, and we weren't entirely sure. So I made a quick radio call. Are there any military aircraft in the area can come up and have a look at us? And fortunately, there was a Battle of Britain Flight Memorial Spitfire doing his stuff at the air show. So he came and had a look at us, formated on us, and told us that the nose wheel leg was in fact not fully down. So we were in a bad place. If we decided to abandon, as I've already said, the two pilots would be okay. The air electronics operators would have had to slide out the bottom of the aircraft just ahead of the nose wheel leg, which may have been partly down or not partly down, and they have probably been splattered against the leg. So things were not looking good. We did have an option to ultimately blow the undercarriage down using air. That may have worked, but also it may not have worked and left us in a predicament where there was no way we could get the undercarriage up to allow the rear occupants to jump out or fall out of the airplane. Then God was on our side, or whoever was up there, and there was an enormous crashing and banging noise, similar, I think, to the noise one may hear if you threw an enormous piano down the stairs in a huge building. There was a rattle, a bit of banging, and then suddenly the red light stared at me and went green.
Oh my God.
Right, let's land. So the other chap did a lovely, smooth, tight final turn, a greaser of a landing, held the nose wheel up proudly until about 80 knots, then let it gently drop onto the runway. And we came to a halt by drifting off the runway onto a taxiway, which was at a suitable narrow tangent. We stopped, breathed a sigh of relief, parked up, went and said thank you to everybody who was involved, and then went to the hotel to sort of discuss what had happened. And that was that. The next day, we flew the airplane back to base with the undercarriage locked down, and sadly had to miss quite a few air shows.
Right. But that was you actually came quite close to throwing the aeroplane away, didn't you?
Yep. And at that time, everybody's eyes were on vintage jets because it wasn't that long after the Shoreham tragedy. So we were very aware that the spotlight was on our community and we had to do things correctly. Luckily, everything worked out okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm pleased that
You're
was the
pleased.
case. Yeah, I bet. Yeah. So finally, get us back on the ground. So in the circuit and making a landing, what sort of numbers are you? What's the process?
You get yourself downwind with the undercarriage down and mid-drag air brake, which are big planks that stick out the top and the bottom of the wing.
And when you say air brakes, I'm guessing on a Vulcan, they're like the size of a small van, aren't they?
Yeah, you effectively have a small park bench that pops out the bottom of the airplane and a bigger park bench out the top of each wing. And that allows us to slow up, get the undercarriage down, get in the realm of a higher power setting.
Yeah.
So we've got more response. And then we just trundle downwind as per any airplane. Not particularly good view out the front. So if you're in the right-hand seat and you're doing a left-hand circuit, the chap in the left-hand seat would do your lookout for you effectively. And you would, at the end of the downwind leg, as per any airplane, throttle back a little bit, lower the nose, select an attitude that you're familiar with, and just get yourself around final. You need a lot of rudder work. There's quite often a lot of adverse aileron yaw, similar effect, and you'd have to sort of pedal your way around the final turn, line up with the runway, get stabilized by about 300 feet, good amount of power set, pointing straight down the runway, and then just drive it onto the ground with a slight check back. Way back, we used to occasionally deploy the big, huge brake chute in the air just before we touched down, so that you'd touch down, the brake chute would tug, and the nose would drop and you'd come to a halt fairly quickly. We rarely used the brake chute because they reckon it cost £2,000 every time we deployed it. You had to get a whole nation of people to pack the chute up again. So we would bring the airplane to within a whisker of the ground and then check back a little bit. The ground effect, you would feel this enormous cushion of air under the airplane. It was nice, and it could turn a terrible landing into quite a good landing. I found that was my excuse. And we'd touch down and then gradually, with both hands, move the stick rearward and rearward, holding the nose off until you were feeling this is about it at about 80 knots. And then you'd lower the nose gently and just nod the nose wheel onto the runway and gently bring the airplane to a halt. If you didn't use the brake chute or you didn't use aerodynamic braking, you still had wheel brakes.
Yeah.
So unlike most airplanes, we had 3 ways of stopping the airplane.
Okay. What sort of speed on final?
About 145 knots most of the way around final, dropping it off to about 135 just before you touch down.
Okay.
And it was a continuous turn, which I find easier, and it was more fun and it looked better.
And did you ever, in terms of in kind of getting to know the aeroplane, did you ever go out and fly any stalls or anything?
Yes.
What's it stall like?
It's a weird thing, I have to say. We went up to a huge height where we would practice asymmetric flying, where we'd throttle back 2 engines and practice flying on 2. Because if you're going to lose one engine, if one engine went bang, it would probably knacker the next engine to it as well. So we would practice asymmetric and have a look at stalling, which was not a conventional stall. So you'd raise the aircraft nose up until it felt like that. You felt as if your heels were resting on the horizon outside, throttle back, and then the airplane would rattle and bang not comfortable, and it would sink like that through the sky. So the only real way to tell if you're going down or up was to look at the altimeter. If you're going down, the numbers would be unwinding rapidly. You could not tell by the visual attitude out the front.
Really?
It would mush down whilst rattling and banging.
What sort of sink rate?
A lot, off the scale. It was more than enough. So we learnt from that, you don't want to get into that situation. Luckily, the airplane had a huge amount of excess power at lightweight. So if we ever got down to tricky situations, you could probably blast your way out of it.
Yeah. And I'm right in remembering that your last display was also your last Vulcan flight?
Yes. My last Vulcan flight was quite a complicated flight where we got airborne from Doncaster. It was to be a tour of the north of the country. So we flew up the east coast via Sunderland, Newcastle, up into Scotland, off to the left, Edinburgh, down through the Lake District, and we had 14 different targets to fly over on that route. And the Vulcan to the Sky organization published those targets. And at each turning point, there were a lot of people. I was amazed at that. I thought there might be one or two people out waving a little flag, but no, there were lots and lots of people. Very, very humbling. So the standout moment for me was we were heading north-south through the Lake District in the Windermere area, and we flew down between two huge hills, past a place called Dunmail Raise, and in this distance, myself and the chap next to me, we could see all these flashes, and we just didn't know what it was. But what it was a whole pile of enthusiasts, hundreds of them, taking photographs.
Oh,
and
wow.
I have to say, that gave me a lump in my throat, and I thought people love this airplane, as we all did. So we flew through there, went at low level over the airfield in the Liverpool area where they built the airplane, went over a whole pile of other airfields, and then set off to Breeton in Yorkshire, where we were to do a display in front of a small crowd, but mainly in front of a helicopter, which was off to one side with a whole pile of cameramen on board. So we did an abbreviated display in poor light conditions, I must admit, at RAF Breeton, and then set off 20 miles south to Doncaster, landed, got out of the airplane, covered in sweat, thought that was that, drove home, and then went to work the next day.
Wow.
Wow.
That must be amazing and an enormous come down.
Yes, we could have continued for another 2 years, but the engineering organizations that effectively ran us, which was Rolls-Royce, Marshall's Aerospace, and BAE Systems, I think they all went into a huddle and went, do you know, old airplanes, it's getting a bit risky, let's pull the plug on this. And I understand that. We did have enough airframe and engine fatigue to continue for maybe 2 more years, but that was it. They wrapped it up probably at the right time, I think.
Yeah.
But it was good to do.
Yeah. And occasionally there's talk, people go, oh, will it ever fly again?
Never say never. That's the way my mind works. Realistically, it probably will never fly again, but it's still there. It's a Vulcan. It's flyable. The engineers do a great job keeping it ticking over. If the rules changed, and maybe with the advent of 3D printing, some bits that we don't have anymore could be put in the airplane. If you got a rich American came over and sponsored it, you never know.
Take it to America. That would be a great
That
plan,
nearly
wouldn't it?
happened.
Yeah.
That was one of the options. Apparently, in the last season or two, the Russians wanted it to use in their development for the wing-in ground effect aeroplanes.
Oh, wow.
So it would scoot around over the Caspian Sea at not very high. Also, allegedly, I think it was Boeing wanted to use it for some development
Well,
thing.
they had a big blended.
They did.
Blended wing.
Yeah.
They did. So there would have been a thing, who was going to fly it across the Atlantic? I don't know. There'd have been lots of regulatory issues there. But if
But
you
you've got
could have-
halfway and started to turn left.
Yeah. Well, that sort of thing has crossed my mind in the past. But yeah, we could have taken it to America, and they would have written experimental on the side, and it would probably still be flying today.
Yeah. Bill, I think absolutely incredible to hear the story of flying the Vulcan, and and some stories from your flying career.
Well, thank you very much.
I will remind people the fabulous. Isn't this such a glorious cover?
That's a fantastic design, isn't it?
I know, yeah. So yeah, obviously, from Vulcan to Spitfire and back is out. When is that out?
March the 30th.
And it's available on Amazon. We'll put a link in the video description.
Yeah.
And if people want a signed copy, they could probably bump into you somewhere like Oaksey, can't they? Because
They probably can.
You're still an active flyer, aren't you?
I am. I fly. I'm in a syndicate around a Chipmunk. It's my favourite airplane. Always has been my favourite airplane. Always will be. So I may see some of you around Chipmunk events, de Havilland events.
Well, it's big 80th birthday next year, isn't it?
Yes, and I will be at that. So let's all get together at.
I bet you'll have copies of the book.
And I think we could probably arrange a flyer club get together and
should
signing
do
as well,
that,
couldn't
yeah.
we?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for bringing me along here.
So, Flyer Club news, free landings for December. You've still got a couple of weeks left to use that. This month, we have a massive month, actually. I'm pulled all the stops out for you as my Christmas present. £73 worth of free landings. Carnarvon, Tibbenham, Manchester, Barton, Yatesbury, and 50% off at Sundown. All of those, actually, I did some sums, use a spreadsheet, love a spreadsheet.
Ooh.
That takes 2025 to a total of £607. I think we should ask, actually, Flyer Club members, I'd love to know who's done the most. So who actually has saved the most money? How much did you save?
Yeah. I mean, if you used, I was thinking about this, if you used all the Flyer Club landing vouchers,
Yes.
and you were like, well, I quite fancy a snazzy headset, you will have saved enough money to go out and buy a headset.
Or half a headset, if you want a really flashy one.
Depends how snazzy you're feeling.
And we'll see how 2026 goes.
Yeah.
You might be able to get the other half of the headset. I have already lined up for January Retford, Gamston. There's a couple of others in the works as
Very
well.
good.
So yeah, they'll get announced soon enough.
Us.
Webinars.
Lots of those.
Yeah, lots of webinars. DC's built a new page for those to make them a bit easier to find. And we have one coming up next Tuesday with Nigel Webb, which will be a bit of an update on airframe icing. So that's Tuesday the 16th, usual time of 7. On catch up, of course, all of the webinars, which I think in total is about 30 over the last few years. Recent highlights are our very own Ed Hicks talking about his air-to-air photography secrets. We had Dr. Frank Verton on lifestyle changes to keep you flying. We've got ones on piston engine icing. And Greener's, of course, giving his forced landing advice.
That is a golden one. That really
is
really
brilliant.
good. But yeah, lots of good stuff in the seminars, in the webinars.
Yep.
Archive.
Yeah.
So very good. It must be time for. Okay, so Fancy Hangar this week, in honour of the fact that we've had the fabulous Bill Perrins on talking about flying the Vulcan. It could only be Vulcans for our own Fancy Hangar. It could only be Delta aircraft for our Fancy Hangars, and there's not the usual choices here. I think I'm right in saying who's going to go first.
I think it's me.
Yeah.
Is it you?
It is me.
Go on, Annabelle. Hit us up with your your Delta desire.
Hit us up.
Yes.
Ed's trying to be young.
I know.
Cool.
It doesn't work.
I have picked the RAF 2175. RAF. I said to Ed earlier, how do I pronounce this? And he told me, and I've gone with the opposite of what he said because I thought that was safe.
I think that's very rude. My pronunciation is always fantastic.
What's that little aircraft that you can never say?
What, the British one?
Yeah.
Called an Oster?
Oster. Oh, well done.
See,
anyway.
Played you.
So the RAF, this is an adorable 2-seat GA Delta with side-by-side seating, a composite structure, and folding wings and tail.
It looks like something out of the Jetsons.
It does, doesn't it? I love this. You could, in theory, park this in your garage. In fact, the requirement to limit the span and keep the loads within limits were what led to it being a Delta in the first place.
Okay.
So this was designed in the early 70s by RAF as a direct competitor to Cessna. Yes, shocker. Only 2 flying prototypes were ever completed, and depending on which source you read, logged around 120 hours of flying time, which it's not a huge amount, but it was enough to prove the concept worked.
Do you think Cessna was concerned? Do you think at any time, in the competitiveness department, they went, "There's a guy who's challenging us with a Delta," and people were like, "Don't care."
Yeah. So this was powered by a Lycoming-derived engine that drove a ducted fan. There's not a lot of information around on this, but generally sources are suggesting that produced around 150 horsepower at 4,400 RPM. I couldn't find any credible performance data, but I did see one source mentioning a climb rate of 1,280 feet per minute.
For something that goes on the road, I think the important question is, was it a good car?
It's a really sexy car.
Yeah.
Compared with other GA aircraft of the time, it was a really clever design with a composite construction, shrouded propeller, futuristic lines, and foldy-uppy wings and tail. I love a foldy wing. Sadly, Roa got onto financial difficulties with other projects, and the 2 was cancelled. Both prototypes were destroyed, which is such a waste. There's a niche fan base online for this, and that has increased by 1 because I would love one of these in my hangar.
That's a good choice. I like, and that is. I always think Fancy Hangar is all about. Do you have amazing aeroplanes where people walk in and it stops them in their tracks?
And
And
then,
that is one
wow!
of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I
that's-
said,
yeah.
proper Jetsons. Dave.
Yeah.
Well, I was tempted by the Saab Viggen
Oh, I love a Saab.
because if you can have one Delta Wing, why not have 2? It's if you look at the profile of a Saab Viggen, it's got one set as a canard at the front,
Yeah.
one as a main wing. And the reason it did this is so that it could use Sweden's system of 500-metre runways, that
Also known as motorways. Isn't
also
it?
known as motorways. Yes.
Yeah.
However, I decided it was too impractical, so I looked around and I remembered that the Rogallo wing aircraft is
Yeah.
a sort of delta wing.
It is.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a self-inflated delta wing, in fact, developed by a chap called Francis Rogallo, an engineer at NASA. It was considered to land the Gemini space capsule instead of parachutes because you could obviously control it.
Yeah.
and
You
steer
can
it.
steer where it goes.
Yeah. For various reasons, it didn't happen. They went for parachutes, probably for simplicity reasons. But it did go into the world of hang gliding and microlights, flex wing microlights. And I would go for a P&M Quick R flex wing microlight because it's the most high performing flex wing microlight you can get. It's got a really high tech wing.
Right. Well, it's a Delta.
It's a Delta, yes, but it's a smaller wing than most, but it has also got, you can self adjust according to load, and so you can also alter the aerodynamics as you fly. And it was used by the British team at the Dubai World Games a few years ago.
And they were really successful, weren't they?
Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 8. They walked
That is
away
really
with
successful.
the whole thing. And I said it's down to this smaller advanced wing, but it's also powered by 100 horsepower Rotax 912, which pushes it along at decent rate.
Very good. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Well, that just leaves me. And as a home builder, there's only one true choice of Delta aircraft, and that's the Dyke Delta from the 1960s. I know it's a bit love it or hate it, but from a lot of angles, it is quite a looker. So it's a 4-seater. No, stop it.
Which
Stop
angle
it.
is that? Ed?
A 4-seater. Wings can be folded so that you can tow it home for storage, and they hinge up to lie flat on top of the fuselage, one on top of the other. I know, yeah, it's like a dance. Designer John Dyke said he was inspired by Alexander Lippisch, who designed the LP6 glider and later the Convair F102 Delta Dagger.
That explains the design then, doesn't it?
It does, very Delta-ish. For research into his proposed layout, Dyke actually made models and mounted them on the front of his car. So it's almost like automotive Delta jousting. Maybe could have been in his neighbourhood. Anyway, so he drove around aerodynamically testing models on the front of the car. Also flew some radio-controlled aeroplanes. He created his JD1 Delta, which flew in July 1962. That was all going great till he was welding on it in the garage at home. And it caught fire in the garage. In the garage. Anyway, JD1 caught fire, turned into ash. From those ashes, he created the JD2, which is the Dyke Delta that everyone knows and loves. There's always been one or two of them at EAA Oshkosh, and they are a stop you in the tracks aeroplane, not because they're ugly, but because they are beautiful and intriguing.
Yes, Ed.
Cruise 150 knots, range 760 nautical miles. Approach speed is 90 knots, which is a bit hot, as it stalls at 60 knots. Fun fact about the Dyke,
no.
and it enables me to use the word interesting. Pierre Robin actually liked the Dyke Delta and got the plans. And for a time, it looked like Robin might actually make a Dyke Delta inspired light aeroplane. And they actually made a version, took it to the Paris Air Show. That aeroplane still exists today. An enthusiast owns it. But it wasn't intriguing enough for Robin to go, these cranked wings, we're going to get out of that and go with Deltas. Delta was in the dustbin. So, but I still think Dyke Delta is a peach.
There's a Belgian version of that sort of
There
thing.
is the Verhees Delta. So that's been through a couple of iterations. And the latest version of that is a two-seater powered with a Rotax 912. Yeah. And the designer of that has turned up at the LA Rally and has proceeded to camp in the aeroplane because the huge wide cockpit also has like a camping area, which does seem to sit at a really inclined angle.
Yes.
But, must be a bit of a weird sleeping experience, but that's quite cool. I'm never convinced by the idea of sleeping in your aeroplane though, because surely you wake up in the morning and everything is damp.
It depends on your aeroplane. If you've got a Concorde.
Yes, that's a big camping aeroplane.
It's a Delta.
It's a Delta. Yes. Well, yes. If
wasn't allowed Concorde.
We specifically tried to avoid all the obvious choices like Vulcan and Concorde, and even SR-71.
Yeah, he wouldn't let me have that
Delta,
either.
No, we banned those.
Sport.
If you've got a favourite Delta, tell us about it in the comments.
And then Ed will say it's not allowed.
Annabelle's very unfair every week. She says I changed the rules. Not true. Or maybe you liked one of ours. Tell us in the comments.
Events.
Yeah, are there any?
It got to the end of it's Christmassy stuff around, lunches and stuff like that, and some Christmas fairs and things like that. But there are no flying events until New Year's Day, when there's at least 3.
Amazing.
Bodmin, Slape, and Northreps.
Okay.
I can imagine Northreps.
That will be a challenge. If you go, I'm going to do all 3 of those, you'll need a fast aeroplane.
You need Concorde.
That'll do it.
Yep. So, but maybe there's some more come up. New Year's Day fly-ins. That'd be great.
Yeah, the events calendar's been a bit slim, but actually there's things beginning to appear for 2026. So. Yeah. So all good. So that just leaves me to thank Annabelle and Dave for joining me on the show. Thank you for turning up, and thank SkyDemon for supporting us. We obviously couldn't do it without them, and obviously the fantastic Bill Perrins for coming on and being a brilliant guest. And I'm inspired. I'm going to go off and look on YouTube now for videos of Bill giving a sheep a heart attack.
And on that bombshell.
Yeah, until next week. Thanks very much. Bye. Yeah.
I think we do need a bit of that as an outtake as well.
Hang on.
Yeah, we need a camera as well, so that when Ed goes all nerdy later, we can just cut to Jack snoring in the corner.
Join the Flyer Club and be part of the UK's biggest GA community. Save hundreds of pounds with free landing vouchers, watch expert-led webinars and access all the online content on flyer.co.uk. All this and more from just £6 per month or £62 for the full year. Join today at flyer.co.uk/membership.